So, oh, I just pressed something. So for this React app, we're just going to create a mute button that it's going to literally just render like an SVG, like a image of a speaker, and you click it, and it's going to have like a line through it. So it's going to toggle the on and off, true or false type of thing. So I'm going to clone this repo. It's got some icons in it. Let's see what the icons are. See off. It's got that. So it's going to like toggle that on and off. So here's I'm going to clear this. CD or git clone. Oh, I love that clone. Git clone. Oh, it already exists. Whoops. I'm going to remove that. RF. Wait. RM. RF mute button. All right. I'm going to git clone. Whoop. Clear. LS. So I've got the mute button back there. I'm going to CD in the mute button. And then I'm going to create another React app. So npx create React app. Just call it my app. Here we go again. So in this, we're also going to use state and props. And this time, we're going to actually use class-based components. So instead of functional components, we're going to use class-based just to show you the difference and how to change between a class or a functional component and class component. Takes a while. Does anybody have any questions with regards to state, props, class components versus functional components?
It would be cool to see an example of using functional components from the components folder versus putting them in
Can I just do that?
put it in the app.
Yeah. Doesn't matter whether or not you use a class-based, like React is slowly moving towards a functional component architecture, but you will see class components. So you can use them interchangeably. What's going on? All right, happy hacking. So I'm gonna clear the terminal. I'm going to list. So we've got this README. We have the icons. We have my app. So I'm going to code RF, open stuff up in the current browser or current window. And now I just want to actually, I'm going to copy and paste all this stuff. Sorry. I don't want the my app. I'm just going to move everything into the mute button. So, except for the README. So I'm just going to move everything into here. You want to replace it? Sure, replace. README, so I don't think I need that right now. So there's the README of the mute button. Got the source app.js. I'm going to npm start this just to make sure it works. Hopefully it works. Oh, something popped up. Oh. There we go. Here's our React app for the mute button. So we're going to want to So I said, let's do everything in class-based components instead of functional components. So what do I need to convert this into a class-based component instead of a function component?
Library.
So I need to import the component library from React. Right? What else is unique to a class component versus a functional component? All right. What is it? Class app extends component. Okay. And also the class needs a render function. Render invokes it. Then everything in the return just gets put into here. So it's like there's 4 things you need to do. You need to extend, like import the component, change it for class extends the component, use this render method, or yeah, put this render method, and then move everything from the return into the render method.
I guess what I don't understand, Tom, is how do you choose when to use a class as opposed to use a function?
So going forward, so historically, if you want to declare state, you would use a class component. That's how the old kind of React worked. But now, with the introduction of hooks, with that like use state up here and like declare state, where you can declare a state within a function component, they're kind of moving away from the class components. So you can kind of pick and choose, but you're going to need to know both because you're going to run into both when you're at your job if you're working in React, stuff like that. So, but here we're just going to use class components just to mix it up to show kind of like how to do it in class components. So a React app is working, and also the difference between functional and components and class components is in functional components you can just always console log wherever you want. You can't do that here in class components. You can't do it between like here and the render method, but you can do it anywhere within the render method. Right here. If I do it like console log here, it shouldn't work. See how it threw an error? Parsing error, unexpected token. All right.
Because in a component or a class-based, the only things you can have are
Methods.
Constants and methods.
Yeah. So first, let's declare our state. So state has to be a dictionary. Let's call a mute is muted. Let's first make it false. Because what we're going to be doing is toggling between true, like is muted, not muted. So down here, let's get rid of this. Let's do a div. And, oh, that's not right. And let's just display the state. How would I display the state here? This dot state. And actually, let's do is muted. So again, just think of classes in Python. You always have to refer to self, just like, so you pretty much have to use self or this when you're declaring classes in JavaScript. Where'd it go? Oh. So nothing's showing up right now because I think it's just because it's false.
They have to make it a string.
There we go. So let's just console log that here. State equals this state is muted. And within here, let's just do, what did I put for test or whatever? So I've got this class component. I declared my state equals, has to be a dictionary. I have this is muted key. Initially, it's declared to false. And we have this div here that just displays test. So our current state is false. And when I click on it, I want it to change the state to true. I want it to change the is muted to true. What can I do? On click, and then like execute some function.
You write it within the anonymous function inside the.
I could do that, like right there. Could do that. Definitely. Let's separate out everything just for readability. So this method called toggle mute equals an anonymous function. Actually, it's not a function called toggle mute, and let's console log something. Console log the state again. Toggle. This state is muted. And now, since we're not doing it, will this work? Oh, toggle mute is not defined on 18. This, because we have to reference this context. Cool. So I'm refreshing, and when I click on it, it's not clickable. Why isn't it working?
Refresh it maybe?
No. Anything, do I have to invoke it? No. Toggle is muted. Why isn't it doing it? I think so. Console log. Is it perhaps bind? No, that doesn't work. See if this works. Just gonna copy and paste this code in here. See if anything changes. Is console log even showing up?
When you paste it, you paste it in the console log too.
There's a console log here. Oh, there we go. That was weird. Why did that work? Not that. Well, I don't know why that did it.
It was.
Yeah, it's working now.
Yeah.
That was weird. Maybe it was. I think it. Yeah, I don't know why. Maybe it was just taking a while to compile, but that was weird.
So just doing something to took a while for it to
Compile.
Yeah.
Let's move that back. So there we go. We got toggle false, state false. So when we toggle it, this on click, we want to change the state to true. We want to toggle back and forth, like on click, we want to toggle it back and forth. So how do I change the state in a class component?
You just directly redefine the.
Oh no.
No.
You wrote that 100 times in the challenge yesterday.
You use the function that comes with it.
Use the function that comes with it. Can you elaborate on that a little bit there, David?
Well, you said it returns two things. It returns a state, and then it returns a change state or a function to be able to change it.
So that's specifically for functional components. We're in a class component now.
Oh,
State, and we have a set state.
So correct. So we have a state. Now we also have a this.set state. That's the method that we need. That takes in dictionary, which is state, and is muted. True. Let's see if that works. So when I click on this toggle, this test, it's going to execute this toggle mute function, and it's going to run this.set state, and it's going to change is muted to true. And let's just console log. Actually, I don't even think I need to, because it's going to render down here. Refresh. State is false. State is true. But now it's staying true. I want it to turn to false. So I want to toggle it true and false.
You're just gonna make it the opposite of whatever it was.
All right, how do I do that?
Use the bang.
Ooh, like that?
Yeah.
This state is muted. Like that. So this bang operator returns the exact opposite of the current value of this dot state is muted. So if this dot state muted is currently false, it's going to return the opposite, which will be true. It'll set to the opposite value. So I'm going to refresh. State is false. State is true. State is false. State is true. So now what should we do? Let's create another component that actually has like the mute button. Because we want to kind of separate code, separate things out. So components. Let's create another folder called mute button. A new file called mute button.
Yeah.
.js. Cool. So in here, let's create another class component. RC that. Bam. So if you just do RC, this whole drop down, then you can kind of select. So on RCC, there you go. Great. So it's rendering. Now, how do I pass that? So down here, instead of doing this, I want to render that mute button. So we'll call div mute button. So what do I first have to do to render this mute button in place of this? So I need access to the mute button.
Yes. So you need to. Yeah. Oh well.
For import.
Yeah. I mean, we need to import it from that.
All right. Let's import mute button from components
Components,
mute button.
mute button.js.
Yep, mute button.js. Mute button is defined, but never used.
Let's use it.
Let's use it. Mute button. There we go. Let's see what shows up. Mute button. So we're importing our mute button into our app.js right here, and we're rendering the mute button component, which comes into here, which is a class component, and it's rendering this div right here. Now, how do I pass down the state is muted?
Props.
All right. Let's see if, let's just console log props right now. Oh, props is not defined. Why isn't props defined?
So we haven't passed it to the child.
You gotta go to the.
So it's automatically passed down when it's a class component. So if I do this props, it's empty right now. So it always has the props value, but it doesn't actually have anything in there. So we need to pass in the true value and everything like that. But before, let's see. Yeah. So let's pass in the is muted to the mute button. Is muted equals this state is muted. So now when I render this props, let's look what it says. Is muted equals false. Not bad. Now what else do I need to do? So if I wanted to change, it's not clicking. Yeah. So whoop. In this render function, I can do any kind of JavaScript in here. So what do I want to check? So if I want to toggle is muted true or false, and I want to change the image, like I want to change this button, like is muted, and then also like, or do like a is not muted. So I can return is not muted. But how do I test that? So I can do any kind of JavaScript in here. Like if this dot props is muted equals at false. All right.
Drop all that good news.
That's stupid. So it is not muted. So it's coming in here, it's running this render, hits this comes out to be true. So it's rendering this, it's returning that. And then it doesn't even get to this point. And if I change this to immediately true, so I'm changing the initial state to true, and it's like is muted. Cool. But now how do I toggle it? Okay, let's do an on click right here. I don't know what it's supposed to call.
SVG import that from the app.
So I've got these on-click event handlers, but I want to call this toggle mute button. How do I pass in this toggle mute function into the mute button component?
Curly braces?
Can you elaborate a little bit more?
Put a curly brace around toggle mute?
Like this?
No, in the, where you were at, where
Here?
mute button is muted. This that state is muted.
So like toggle mute button equals toggle mute.
Toggle mute, yeah.
Let's see. Parsing error. Okay, that's normal because. So this props, because it's in the props, toggle mute. State false. Oh, look at that.
That's fancy.
Sweet. So what we just did, we created a mute button component, which returns a render because it's a class. The mute button is a class component, renders, enters this render method, comes in here, checks if this.props.isMuted equals false, and that's being passed down from the parent component, which is app, right here, is muted equals this.state is muted. Comes in here. It's called this.props.isMuted. If that's false, it's going to return and render this. And this div takes in an on-click handler that's calling the toggle mute button, or toggle mute function, which is also being passed down from the parent via props, right down here in the toggle mute. Now this can be called anything. And if we call anything, then we'll have to change this .props to anything. There we go. Come on. All right. Now, let's do, we want to use an image, don't we?
Yeah.
So how do I use image?
You grab the image into your sources.
All right. So I'm going to import icons. So I have to move the icons into the source. So here we go. We have our icons. That's just an SVG. Don't worry about what that actually means. So now I'll have access to the icons. So everything within the source folder is compiled. That's like where everything is get. So anything that we want access to our app has to come into the source folder. I want to import those on icon and off icons. Let's see if this works.
Now those links.
I don't think
That part. So it's got to go up a level, up another level, go into icons, then grab it. So I'm going up 2 levels from the mute button. Up 1, right there.
Oh, okay.
And then up another one to components, right there. And then I'm accessing the icon folder. So in here, I want to create an image. I don't even remember what image is. The image tag is different in like that. So it takes the source, Is this the off icon? Let's do the opposite for down here. Oh. So we got like a little error. So, image elements must have an alt property with either meaningful text or an empty string for decorative images. Okay, so it needs an alt property, off icon, alt on icon. All right, it's off. That is pretty. There we go. Any questions?
I think it's backwards from the output.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, it says it's muted. It's, tough fix.
Kind of cool. So next, writing like this dot props dot is muted. It's kind of a pain. So you know how we can do array destructuring? So let's do something called let. I think it's called is muted. Toggle mute. We're going to do this dot props. Now change that, toggle mute.
Oh, so it adds this.
So yeah, it's like assigns a variable this, or it looks into props, see what keys, and then it just assigns it to the same value. So it looks a little more cleaner.
Yeah.
It's called destructuring. What questions do you have? Let's go through one more time. We created a class component, which is different from a functional component. We declared state called isMuted equals false. We're importing, then we created another class component called mute button, which will toggle between images, the on and off image, based on the value of isMuted. The isMuted, the state, is passed down to the mute button, the child, via this isMuted equals this dot state is muted. Likewise with the toggle mute function is being passed down to its child via props, that's what it's called. Via this toggle mute equals this toggle mute. So the mute button class component takes in this props, which has this mute button, or is muted, in the toggle mute method. So now we can use this throughout our application, or throughout this component. When it renders, it destructures is muted and toggle mute from this props. And then if is muted equals false, it's going to return this JSX, which is a div that has the toggle mute button event handler, this on-click event handler. That when clicked, it will actually toggle, change the state to true, false. If it's true, it returns this JSX with the off icon. Questions? Remote, what questions do you have? Anything you want me to review, go a little bit more in depth on something, or so for today's curriculum or today's lecture or today's challenges, go through this mute button challenge again. Does it all in class components, walks you through it. We just did all this stuff. Import is muted, returns. Then we talk about destructuring.
Yeah.
Gives a little more example. This is all in the curriculum for today. So we went through all of this. And this, for this mute button, they used a, and then they also just gave you, changed it to a functional component.
That's awesome.
Let's change, you want to change it to a functional
Please,
component?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's change this class component to a functional component and this mute button to a functional component. So again, there's 4 steps. So we need to import use state because we're using functional components. Use state. We don't need this, what is it, function app. Then we're invoking it. We don't need this render anymore. Get rid of that. I'm just gonna format it real quick. There we go. In order to declare state in a functional component, we need to let is muted, set is muted equals use state, initial value of state is false. Then when we toggle, so we don't need this anymore. So before I change that, let's just, for the toggle, what do I need to call here? Is set is muted? Like I want to change the state. Set is muted. Is it just true?
Oh, no, to bang.
Bang is muted.
Yeah.
So we can get rid of this state. We can get rid of this set state. Let's just console log. Let's get rid of this state. And let's get rid of just this keyword. What happened? Toggle mute is not defined. On line 10. So function.
Yeah.
No, down
Inside the
button.
inside the button, you call it a function instead of just as the word inside.
Line 10. Oh, it's working. So I have to declare it because it's a function. Let's see if this is working. There we go. It's still working for app. So in functional components, we have to like declare the functions as variables. Or can we do function? Oh. That work? Same thing. So we can do function, name the function, or do like a fat arrow function. With declare, use let. So we're passing the mute button. This is muted and toggle mute as props into here. It's working, but now let's change this mute button into a functional component. So we can get rid of this render. Right? We're not actually declaring state in this functional component. Oh, what's that mean? So we got rid of render.
Get rid of the extending component.
Get rid of this extend component. declare, call this a function. Mute button. Oh, still need the parentheses. Thank you. Component is defined but never used down here. That's fine. We don't need that anymore. Is it still working? Nope. Function says cannot read property props of undefined. Well, because we haven't actually passed in props. It's probably still going to throw an error. That's what it says. This prop. Mute button on JS line 5. Probably because right here, maybe. There we go. Look at that. Now there's another way we can do this. We can call it like let mute button equals props. Same thing. Questions? So that's what we just did. We just changed it, class components to functional components. So go through this. Today's Thursday. Partner, pair program, remote, please pair program. Have in-person, pair with a remote person. And then here are your challenges for today. We have Whack-A-Mole, Mad Lib, and Hangman. So with Whack-A-Mole, Mad Lib, did I say Lib Mad or something before? And this Hangman. So with Whack-A-Mole and Mad Lib, you're already given the core. So you don't actually have to create a React app. You don't have to actually run that. It's already right here. So let's look. I'm going to go out one, clear. So for Whack-A-Mole, it's kind of fun. We're going to deal with like props and render and state. Essentially 6 Whack-A-Mole, like 6 moles are going to show up, like holes, and then you're going to have to like whack them. They're going to randomly appear on the screen. So the core application's already been built for you, but you just needed to do this stuff, these releases. Anyway, in order to get clone, I'm going to get clone this. So get clone ls cd Whack-A-Mole clear. I'm going to code this. So everything's already here for you. But the packages like React and everything aren't already installed for this app for you on your local machine. So you don't actually, so if I do like, I'm in npm start, it failed. Because you haven't actually installed any of this stuff yet. So in order to install all these packages, React DOM, React scripts, everything, you need to do npm install, and it's going to run this package.json file, look through it, and it's going to look at dev dependencies, it's going to install this library, it's going to install React, it's going to install React DOM. So I'm going to npm install. It goes, it's installing everything, it's installing all the libraries. Might get a package.json.lock file might show up, I think. Yeah, Yarn is like another thing for like npm. There we go. So we got our node modules that showed up. And we have Yarn. So here we go. So this looks more like it. Now I can do npm start. It's loading. There we go. That's the app's kind of already built for you. Now you just have to do the requirements. But I just want to let you know that you have to npm install once you clone down the repo to install all the required dependencies. All right. Pair programming today. Please repair remote, pair it with somebody here, vice versa. Any questions?